While eating his meal, the prisoner suddenly had a bold idea. Seeing the guard head to the adjacent cell, he quickly moved his bed. Then he skillfully pried open the bricks on the wall and cautiously peered into the opening. At this moment, the warden was inspecting the prisoner next door and noticed he was lying motionless on his bed. So, he instructed the guard to lift one of the man's feet, and the warden took a torch and burned it. But the man still didn't react. The warden had no choice but to give up, remarking that this guy was a really heavy sleeper. Afterward, the man overheard that there would be a major operation behind the prison, so the guards wouldn't be doing their rounds for the next month. This was good news as his tunnel wasn't completely dug through yet, and his companion had actually been pretending to sleep, all to trick the guard into revealing information, and sure enough, they got good news. So they continued their digging work. Since the prison was built on an island, their goal was to dig toward the sea. This way, when they escaped, they could completely avoid the guard's sight and swim directly into the ocean. Although the priest had been digging for 14 years due to a miscalculation, he had dug in the wrong direction, forcing them to change direction and start digging again. Together, the two could dig about half a meter each day, so it would take roughly 10 years. Just as they were discussing how to deal with the excavated soil, a guard suddenly came to deliver food. The man quickly hid in the corner. After returning to his own cell, he sat there thinking for a long time, and suddenly came up with a good idea. So he took his food bowl and told the guard that he had accidentally broken it and needed a new one. Although this prison never allowed prisoners to go outside, it was somewhat humane in certain aspects, and the guard immediately brought him a new one. In this way, they had a tool to handle the soil, but an accident still occurred. One day, as the man was preparing to come over and dig, the entrance to the tunnel suddenly collapsed. He was pinned under the rocks, and at this moment, the sleeping priest also heard the noise. He quickly ran in to help, but since the prison walls were all made of limestone, while he was moving stones to rescue the man, he accidentally inhaled a large amount of dust. However, he gritted his teeth and pulled the other man out. Fortunately, the man was not seriously injured. The two, who had escaped death, simply embraced each other. After years of getting along, they felt like father and son. Besides digging every day in their spare time, the priest would impart all the knowledge he had learned to the man without reservation. He knew that the other man had been framed by a friend and imprisoned. Moreover, after he was imprisoned, his wife had actually married his friend. The man wanted revenge all the time, so the priest taught him these things, hoping it would be helpful to him. However, good times didn't last long. One morning while the man was eating, he suddenly heard a cry for help from next door. He quickly ran over to check and found the priest lying on the ground, struggling to breathe, precisely due to inhaling a large amount of dust yesterday. The man quickly helped him onto the bed. His condition was very bad. It was clear he wasn't going to make it. The other man seemed to know this too. So he quickly told him to pry open a broken brick in the corner of the wall and take out a piece of parchment hidden inside. This was a treasure map detailing the location of the Count of Monte Cristo's treasure. The priest had been the Count's steward in his younger years, but unexpectedly the Count had a sudden misfortune, and he himself was arrested. They were after the Count's treasure, but these people never imagined that the treasure map was on the steward. Now he was too weak to keep it safe, and only hoped that the man could find it after he got out. Afterward, the man carefully put away the treasure map and returned to his cell. The next morning, he suddenly heard the sound of the guard's footsteps. When he peered through the hole, he discovered that the priest was dead. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Soon after, the warden ordered the priest's body to be thrown into the sea. After the guards left, the man cautiously crawled out of the hole. Looking at the other man's body, he couldn't shake off his grief for a long time. The two had spent nearly 7 years together. Although they weren't related by blood, the priest had always treated him like his own son, but now they were separated by life and death. But the man knew he had to pull himself together. Looking at the cold body, he suddenly had a bold idea. He quickly tore open the cotton shroud, took out the body, and then dragged the priest into his own cell, carefully placing him on the bed. Afterward, the man cut off his own hair and made it into a wig, which he put on the priest's head. Then he covered him with the blanket, disguising him as if he were asleep. Once all this was done, he secretly slipped into the body bag, then took out a needle and thread and sewed the bag tightly shut. Before long, the guards returned after eating. Without doing any inspection, they carried the body bag away. The two quickly arrived at the rooftop. To prevent the body from floating, they tied a large iron ball to it. After doing this, the guards felt confident enough to carry the bag to the edge of the wall and then throw the body down. After it fell into the sea, the man quickly took out his homemade dagger, cut open the bag, and climbed out as fast as he could. Every second now would determine his life or death. Once out, he didn't dare delay for a moment, untied the iron ball from his body, and then swam quickly toward the surface. At this time, the guard on the other side came to deliver food to the man as usual, only to find him lying motionless on the bed. The guard thought the man was sleeping in, so he angrily opened the door and went in. But when he lifted the blanket, he was shocked to find that it wasn't the man lying on the bed, but the priest. He immediately sensed something was wrong and quickly called the warden. When he saw the body and the scattered hair on the ground, the warden instantly pieced things together. He hurriedly ordered his men to move the bed and remove the loose brick. They never would have imagined that these two had dug such a long tunnel in the dark and desolate cell. By the time they were discovered, it was already too late. By now, the man had already swum ashore. Although he had, having successfully escaped from prison, an even more arduous task awaited him: revenge and finding the Count's treasure. But before seeking revenge, he had to get rid of his prison uniform. Otherwise, being seen by the authorities would mean certain death. So, the man quietly ran into a farm. While the owner was out, he conveniently took a few pieces of clothing that fit him and quickly changed into them. Looking at his own disheveled appearance in the mirror, he felt even more angry. 15 years of imprisonment had turned a handsome young boy into a haggard, middle-aged man. It was all their fault. The next day, he returned to his hometown with a new look, intending to see his father, whom he hadn't seen for many years. But he unexpectedly learned from a neighbor that his father had passed away many years ago. Following the neighbor's directions, he arrived at the church, and soon the cemetery keeper led him to the grave. He learned from the keeper that his father had died of grief from missing his son, and there, next to his father's grave, was another tombstone with his own name on it, indicating that he had died 10 years before his father. It turned out that in his enemy's eyes, he was already dead, and more importantly, they had indirectly caused his father's death. But then an even more devastating event struck him like a bolt from the blue. When he arrived at his wife's house with excitement, he learned that she had not only remarried, but had also moved to Paris. Facing two heavy blows at once, the man was momentarily unable to accept reality. He wandered aimlessly through the streets and suddenly encountered a group of guards. He quickly and instinctively hid to the side, knowing that if they discovered his identity as an escaped convict, the consequences would be unimaginable. Just then, a prisoner being escorted suddenly turned and ran. A guard, seeing this, hurriedly chased after him right towards where the man was hiding. The man watched as the prisoner was tackled to the ground and then brutally beaten. Having been a prisoner himself, the man couldn't bear to watch. He decisively stepped forward, knocked down the guard, and then punched him unconscious with two quick blows. He then quickly used the keys to unlock the prisoner's shackles. The man told him to leave quickly, but the guy kept following him until they encountered more guards again. The two of them, in a moment of quick thinking, hid inside a nearby carriage. During their conversation, he learned that the other man was a sailor who specialized in smuggling, which was why the guards were after him. Now his ship was docked in the harbor, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to sail. Upon hearing this, the man instantly had an idea. He had once been the captain of a shipping company, and sailing was a piece of cake for him. Soon the two arrived at the cargo ship. The other man had a companion, his nephew. Their destination was Talon. The man then looked at the dashboard, and after observing the wind direction, he said that a storm was coming soon, and they needed to quickly seek shelter on the Isle of Monte Cristo, 10 kilometers away. Soon the three arrived at Monte Cristo. The reason the man had come here was to find the Count's treasure. Non-guide, he then pretended to go hunting in the mountains, but in reality, he was surveying the terrain. After reaching the summit, he took out the map given to him by the priest and saw that no matter which way he went, the location didn't seem right. It seemed the Count's treasure wasn't so easy to find. No matter which way he went, he would always end up at the cliff's edge. Just as he was puzzled, the young sailor came over. He was there to invite the man to continue their journey, saying that the weather was clear now and they should seize the opportunity. He had no choice but to give up for the time being and come back in a few days. Just as he boarded the ship, he inadvertently glanced at the mountaintop and noticed two huge rocks. There seemed to be a door beneath the rocks. He quietly memorized the location. Soon the men landed ashore. They first had a hearty meal at the harbor, then sang and danced, and had a great time. In the evening, the man thought more and more that something wasn't right. There must be something hidden beneath those two huge rocks. So he immediately got on a small boat and returned to Monte Cristo. After searching for a while, he indeed found a door. After moving the stones above it, an opening appeared before his eyes. He couldn't wait to crawl inside. The Count's treasure was indeed hidden here. Looking at the many boxes of gold and jewels on the ground, the man was overjoyed. This wealth would be the key to his revenge plan. A few days later, the man now transformed into the Count of Monte Cristo arrived at the church. He wanted to confess before God in advance, as his path to revenge would inevitably involve bloodshed. After confessing, he first had a gift sent to the young sailor, 2 large ships and 3 private residences. He asked the young man to meet him at the Golden Cockatoo Hotel in Marseille. The man's purpose was simple, to recruit talent. It would be too difficult for him to seek revenge alone. Then he had the young man deliver a stack of banknotes to the farmer, stating it was for the clothes. The farmer was overwhelmed with surprise when he saw the money. It was enough to buy hundreds of outfits. Soon the two met again. As soon as they met, the man directly stated that he wanted to hire him. He explained that he would be doing some things that would involve a certain degree of danger, but in return, he would receive a considerable income. To make the other man follow him more wholeheartedly, the man simply told him about his own experiences, how he was wrongfully imprisoned, and how he escaped. After listening to the story, Arthur decisively agreed, as the man was, after all, his savior. Subsequently, the two went to the police station to investigate Villefort, the prosecutor who had framed the man years ago. Unexpectedly, the prosecutor had now achieved great success and had become the royal prosecutor of Paris. Upon hearing this, the man was furious. To get to the bottom of the truth, he decided to risk going to the police archives. He soon arrived at the records room and told the staff that he worked for the Paris Daily. His editor had asked him to write an article about political prisoners. In his research, he had come across a prisoner named Edmond Dante. He had been imprisoned without any trial, so he wanted to look at his file for inspiration. Upon hearing this, the staff member flatly refused, stating that it was confidential information and could not be disclosed. The monsieur was wrong. However, upon hearing the name Villefort, the staff member immediately became nervous and hurriedly apologized to the man. He said he didn't know the man was with Prosecutor Villefort. In this way, the man successfully obtained the file. After the staff member left, the man immediately opened it. Inside was a letter of denunciation. Looking at this letter, he fell into deep thought. This was the fuse that had led to his conviction and wrongful imprisonment. It wasn't signed, but it mentioned the Cataris Inn. The man couldn't understand why the innkeeper, with whom he had no animosity, would write this denunciation. He then carefully put the letter in his bag, placed the newspaper in the file, and openly returned it to the staff member. After leaving the police station, he immediately took Arthur to the Cataris Inn. He wanted to find out what exactly had happened, only to discover that the innkeeper no longer worked there. 4 years ago, he had sold the inn and opened a small hotel. Helpless, the two had to set off again, and arrived at the hotel. Because the man had changed significantly, the owner didn't recognize him at first, so he took out the letter of denunciation and handed it to the owner. After reading the letter, the owner didn't seem surprised. It wasn't until the man introduced himself that the owner suddenly realized who he was. The man was Edmond, who had supposedly been dead for many years. He quickly begged for mercy, asking the man not to kill him. He had been forced to do it. He hadn't written the letter himself. He was only responsible for delivering it to the police station. Upon hearing this, the man asked who was behind it. Under the pressure from Edmond and Arthur, he had no choice but to tell the truth. The letter had been written by Danglars and Fernand. At the time, he had wanted to stop them because the accusations were unfounded, but they had threatened him. Edmond was furious. It was because of their false accusations that he had been wrongfully imprisoned for 15 years, living a life worse than death. The owner, knew that Edmund had returned for revenge. So he quickly begged for mercy and stated that after Edmund left, he had been the one taking care of Edmund's father. He even brought out Edmund's personal belongings. Edmund was very confused. He could understand Danglars accusing him, as he had taken his captaincy. But why would Fernand do such a thing? The owner was very surprised to hear this because Fernand had married Edmund's fiancée, and now the two of them were living leisurely in Paris. Upon hearing this, Edmund couldn't sit still any longer. His beloved fiancée had actually betrayed him. They had once been so deeply in love. He then learned from the owner that she had also erected the tombstones for him and his father. The man couldn't understand. He had only gone to prison. Why did they all act as if he were dead? After briefly calming his anger, he returned to the inn and offered the owner a chance to atone for his sins by joining his revenge campaign. The owner readily agreed. He didn't want to make any more mistakes. Danglars was now a successful banker. His business is thriving. Fernand had chosen a career in politics and had even received the title of Count just last year. Edmund then asked the owner to go to Paris and investigate these two men, as well as prosecutor Villefort. This man had imprisoned Edmund without a trial, so there must be some connection between the three of them. From that moment on, Edmond Dantès would cease to exist. There was only the Count of Monte Cristo, wholeheartedly seeking revenge. His first target was Danglars, the banker. The man, now the Count of Monte Cristo, directly approached him. He stated that he had a $10 million investment project, but it was in the form of securities. In return, he needed $5 million in cash from Danglars. Because the man had changed so much, Danglars didn't recognize the person in front of him as the former Edmund. Since it was a guaranteed profitable deal, he agreed without hesitation. Seeing that Danglars had fallen for his scheme, the man quickly left to prepare his next step. He then went to the telegraph tower. While the operator went inside, he took out a sleeping potion and poured it into the operator's wine glass. The unsuspecting operator then drank it. Soon he began to feel dizzy and then passed out. Next, Edmund could openly enter the telegraph room and begin his plan to transmit false information. He sent out the content written on the paper, and the telegraph station on the other end quickly replied. Only then did he dare to use the antidote to wake up the operator. The operator didn't suspect anything, thinking he had just drunk too much. Soon, Danglars received information from his subordinates. There had been riots in Spain, and he needed to sell off those securities quickly. The stock prices were plummeting rapidly. Although it was sudden since it involved money, he quickly did as instructed. At this moment, Edmund happened to walk over. Seeing him, Danglars quickly asked if he held any Spanish securities. Hearing that Danglars had sold his securities, the man revealed a triumphant smile. The first step in the plan was to make Danglars lose money. After all, as a banker, he dealt with money every day, and losing money was something these people could never accept. And his next step was to ruin Danglars' reputation. He first had the innkeeper seduce Danglars' wife to extract useful information and evidence of his crimes. Then he handed this evidence to the newspaper. This included the Paris Stock Exchange's trading records for the past 3 years. Corresponding to this were Baron Danglars' personal bank statements. By comparing the two, it could be seen that on the same day, Danglars made large cash withdrawals from his personal account. His wife made significant stock trades in a certain commodity, and these stocks doubled in value within 2 days. The reason Danglars dared to do this was that he had people within the government. This was how he had made his fortune. Soon the police learned about this matter. Danglars was immediately arrested. The charge was using inside government information for illegal trading on the stock exchange. What awaiting him was a dark and desolate prison life. After going in, he received a letter. It was from Edmund. Curious, Danglars opened it and found the original letter of denunciation. Only then did he realize that the Count of Monte Cristo was Edmund. There was also a letter Edmund had written to him. Edmund wished Danglars to spend the rest of his life in prison. Looking at this letter, he only regretted not realizing the other man's true identity sooner. But it was too late. Everything was already over. Next, it was Prosecutor Villefort's turn. Through his investigation, Edmund learned that this man had had an affair with Dangler's wife and had secretly fathered a child with her. To prevent this matter from being exposed, he had cruelly buried the child alive. However, this entire process had been witnessed by the midwife. After Villefort left, the kind midwife dug up the child and raised him. With witnesses and evidence, things were simple. Soon the man, along with the child and the midwife, sued prosecutor Valor in court. What awaited him was a ruined reputation and imprisonment, now that two of his enemies had suffered the consequences of their actions. Only Fernand remained. The man felt even more hatred for Fernand. He had not only almost caused Edmund's death in prison, but had also taken his fiancée. He had to come up with a perfect plan to punish him. A few days later, Mercedes received a gift containing an exquisite earring. It was from the man. He hoped to have a conversation with her, because his next plan might hurt her. Mercedes eventually put on the earring just as Fernand saw her. Mercedes didn't hide anything and said that it was a gift from the Count of Monte Cristo. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Fernand directly asked her if she wanted to become the Count's mistress. Mercedes replied that she was just talking to a friend. Hearing this, Fernand became even more enraged, and the next second he slapped her. In reality, their marriage was not happy. She knew that Fernand often went to other women, but for the sake of her family and her son, she could only endure it. Later, she went to the park as agreed. The man found it strange that Mercedes kept her back to him. Upon closer inspection, he noticed the bruise on her face. He hurriedly stepped forward with concern and gently touched it. The man's voice sounded incredibly familiar to the woman. Then she asked him if he had ever truly loved someone. In fact, Mercedes had recognized the man at their first meeting. She just couldn't believe it, but his words just now completely confirmed it. The person in front of her was Edmund, the man she had deeply loved. Then the man took out a pocket watch. It was their keepsake from years ago. Seeing it, Mercedes couldn't regain her composure for a long time. She never imagined that he had kept it with him all this time. He had already collected all the evidence of Fernand's crimes. Years ago, Fernand was just an ordinary soldier. To gain promotion and wealth, he had actually betrayed his country and defected to the enemy. The enemy had promised him 2 whole chests of gold if he succeeded, but the condition was that he had to help them eliminate Pasha. Soon this matter was reported by the man. Mercedes and her son were shocked. The woman never imagined that her husband was such a vile and shameless person. On the 3rd day, the National Assembly convened a trial on this matter. Faced with the accusations from the assembly members, Fernand initially vehemently denied everything, claiming that someone was framing him. But when a young girl walked into the hall, everything was settled. Because the girl was Pasha's daughter. She held the evidence of his betrayal of the general and acceptance of bribes from the enemy, including his own signature. The man knew that everything was over. He silently turned and left. Fernand's fate was predictable. After years of planning, he had finally achieved his great revenge. Afterward, he returned to the church again and looked at his father's tombstone. His father's life had undoubtedly been tragic. He hadn't enjoyed wealth and status in his youth, and in his old age, his son wasn't by his side. Now he could finally rest in peace. Then he went to Monte Cristo again. Unexpectedly, Mercedes was also there. From this spot, they could clearly see the prison that had held him captive for 15 years, as well as the priest who had treated him like his own son. Then Mercedes asked him what his plans were for the future. Edmund remembered a saying the priest had once told him, "If you seek revenge, dig 2 graves." Although this saying hadn't ultimately come true, he still planned to leave Paris. He might never return. Mercedes didn't answer, but silently took his hand.